They called me the coffee girl, the intern who'd never amount to anything. When the CEO's daughter slapped me in front of the entire boardroom, they all laughed. But what they didn't know? I wasn't there by accident, and in 72 hours, I'd own everything they'd spent decades building. If you've ever been underestimated, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story gets wild. My name is Neve Ashford, and 3 months ago, I walked through the glass doors of Helix Dynamics wearing a cheap blazer from Target and carrying a notebook that cost more than my entire outfit 24 years old, fresh-faced, eager. At least, that's what they saw. A junior operations intern, bottom of the food chain, the kind of person you don't bother learning the name of because they'll be gone in 8 weeks anyway. The office was everything you'd imagine a billion-dollar tech logistics company would be: cold, sterile, glass walls everywhere so everyone could watch everyone else, but nobody really saw anything. The hum of servers filled the silence between the clicking of keyboards and the occasional burst of laughter from the executive wing. People in $1,000 suits moved past me like I was furniture, invisible, irrelevant, exactly how I needed them to see me, because here's what they didn't know. That MIT degree in operations strategy? Real those recommendation letters? Authentic. But I wasn't there to learn. I wasn't there to fetch coffee or make copies or absorb wisdom from my corporate superiors. I was there to watch, to document, to gather evidence. 6 months before I ever stepped foot in that building, a consortium of investors had noticed something off about Helix Dynamics numbers that didn't add up. Money disappearing into ghost vendors, and they needed someone on the inside, someone nobody would suspect, someone invisible. So I became the intern. My first day, I met Daphne Winters, 29 years old, VP of Strategy and daughter of the CEO. She had this way of looking at people like they were stains on her Louboutins. That morning, she walked past my desk, stopped, turned around with this confused expression, and said, "Did someone order lunch? I thought catering came through the back entrance." When I told her I was the new intern, she laughed. Not a polite laugh, a genuine, delighted laugh, like the universe had just handed her a new toy to break. "How cute," she said. "Make yourself useful and grab me a green juice from that place on 5th. Kale, ginger, no ice, and don't take longer than 20 minutes. She didn't wait for my response, just walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. Then there was Reese Calloway, mid-40s, CFO, with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He had this habit of standing too close when he talked to you, invading your space just enough to make you uncomfortable, but not enough that you could call him out on it. I'd catch him and Daphne in his office sometimes, voices low, laughing about something. Once when I was delivering reports, I heard my name. "She's probably someone's charity case," Reese said. "Give it 2 weeks before she realizes she's in over her head." Daphne's response made my blood freeze. "I give it 1. She looks like a crier." I stood outside that office, hand trembling slightly as I gripped the stack of papers. And I smiled, because every word, every insult, every dismissive laugh was just confirming what I already knew. They were so confident in their little kingdom that they'd stopped watching their backs, they'd stopped being careful. And that's when people make mistakes. That's when the cracks start to show. I just had to wait for the right moment to shine a light on them. The thing about being invisible is that people forget you're there. And when people forget you're there, they get careless. By week 2, I'd become part of the furniture, the girl who restocked the coffee pods. The one who sat in the corner during meetings, scribbling notes that everyone assumed were about how impressed I was with their genius. They had no idea I was documenting every inconsistency, every suspicious approval, every vendor that didn't quite exist. But then I met Tate Merrick. He was a junior analyst, maybe 27, with kind eyes and this genuinely warm smile that felt like sunlight in that cold building. He found me in the break room one afternoon, looking defeated after Daphne had sent me across town to pick up her dry cleaning during my lunch break. "She's the worst, isn't she?" he said quietly, sliding into the chair across from me. And just like that, I had an ally, or so I thought. Tate became my friend, my only friend in that place. We'd eat lunch together, and he'd tell me stories about Daphne's cruelty, about Reese's shady dealings that nobody wanted to talk about. "Something's not right with the financial reports," he'd say, shaking his head. "But if you ask questions, you get labeled a troublemaker." I started to trust him, started to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was one decent person in this cesspool. When I casually mentioned that I'd noticed some irregularities in expense reports, his interest seemed natural. Concerned. The way of friends should be, I should have seen the trap closing around me. Week 3. Emergency boardroom meeting about a supplier crisis that was about to cost the company millions. I was told to sit in the back corner and take notes. Stay quiet. Be invisible. Daphne stood at the head of that massive glass table, presenting her solution with the confidence of someone who'd never faced a real consequence in her life, except her strategy was a disaster. I could see it immediately. The numbers were wrong, the timeline impossible, the entire approach fundamentally flawed. It would bankrupt 3 departments and damage relationships with key partners. I couldn't stay silent, not when I had the solution right there in my notes, so I raised my hand. "Excuse me, I think there might be an alternative approach that could—" The room went dead quiet. Every head turned toward me like I'd just stripped naked and started dancing on the table. Daphne's face transformed. Pleasant corporate mask gone, replaced by pure rage. "I'm sorry, who the hell do you think you are?" Her voice was low at first. Dangerous. She started walking toward me, heels striking the floor like gunshots. "You're an intern. You don't speak unless you're spoken to. You don't think you fetch coffee and make copies and keep your mouth shut." She was right in front of me now, towering over where I sat. I could smell her expensive perfume, see the fury in her eyes, and then her hand flew across my face. The slap echoed through that glass room like a thunderclap. My cheek burned, my eyes watered, but I didn't make a sound. Around the table, people shifted uncomfortably, but nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Reese was smirking. Actually smirking. "Someone escort the intern out," Reese said calmly, like we were discussing office supplies. Clearly she's confused about her place here. Security came, walked me back to my desk like I was a criminal, and that's when Tate appeared, wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Pity mixed with something else. Satisfaction. "I'm sorry that happened," he said softly. Then he leaned closer. "But I told Daphne you were snooping through financial files. She needed to know." My blood turned to ice. He wasn't my friend. He'd never been my friend. He was their spy, and I'd walked right into it. They gave me 15 minutes to pack my things, 15 minutes to gather 3 months of fake intern life into a cardboard box, while security watched me like I might steal the staplers. Daphne appeared one last time, arms crossed, that satisfied smile playing on her lips. "Clean out your desk and go," she said. "And if you ever try to trash talk this company, we have lawyers, expensive ones. Lots of them." She wanted me to cry, to beg, to break down and apologize for daring to speak above my station. Instead, I nodded politely, tucked my box under my arm, and walked out with my head high. The parking garage was quiet. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as my footsteps echoed against concrete. I set the box down next to my car, pulled out my phone, and made a call. "Mr. Chen," I said calmly. "It's done. I have everything we need." Let me back up. 6 months before I ever became the intern, I was sitting in a conference room with Daniel Chen and 4 other investors from the Meridian Investment Group. They'd been watching Helix Dynamics for over a year. Money was disappearing. Lots of it. Vendor contracts that didn't make sense. Expense reports that could fund small countries. But from the outside, everything looked clean. They needed someone on the inside, someone who could access restricted floors, observe the key players up close, and document everything without raising suspicion. That someone was me, forensic operations specialist. That was my real title. The intern thing, that was just a costume, and I wore it perfectly. Every coffee run was an opportunity. While Daphne sat in meetings feeling important, I'd swipe my specially coded access card and slip into floors I wasn't supposed to be on. Those little USB drives disguised as chapstick? Data extraction tools? Every time I accidentally dropped something near someone's desk, I was photographing documents reflected in glass walls. That notebook I carried everywhere, filled with transaction codes, timestamps, meeting notes, email chains I'd glimpsed over shoulders. The slap? That was just the final piece, because that boardroom had cameras. High-definition security cameras that I'd personally verified were recording 3 weeks earlier, and now I had footage of the VP of Strategy physically assaulting an employee in front of witnesses who did nothing. That wasn't just evidence of a toxic culture. That was liability. That was lawsuit material. That was leverage. Over 3 months, I'd documented $47 million in fraud Reese had been embezzling through fake vendor contracts, creating shell companies with names just believable enough to slip through quarterly reviews. Daphne was approving luxury business expenses that were actually personal vacations, designer shopping sprees, even her apartment renovation. And Tate? He was on their payroll as an informant, paid to spy on any employee who asked too many questions. They'd bought his loyalty for $60,000 a year, cheap, considering what was at stake. The Meridian Investment Group owned 34% of Helix Dynamics shares, more than the Winters family, more than any individual board member. For months, they'd been waiting for enough evidence to trigger an emergency vote for leadership restructure, the kind of vote that could remove executives, install new management, completely transform a company's direction. And I'd just handed them everything they needed. Mr. Chen's voice on the phone was satisfied. "Excellent work, Neve. The board meeting is scheduled for next Wednesday, 10 a.m. I trust you'll be there?" I looked back at the building, at those cold glass walls where Daphne probably thought she'd won, where Reese was celebrating getting rid of a nosy intern, where Tate was probably congratulating himself on a job well done. "I wouldn't miss it," I said. Wednesday morning arrived like Judgment Day. I stood outside Helix Dynamics at 9:45, but this time I wasn't wearing that cheap Target blazer custom-tailored charcoal suit, heels that cost more than a month of intern salary, hair pulled back in a way that meant business. The security guard at the front desk did a double take when I walked in, flanked by 2 lawyers from Meridian's legal team. "I'm here for the emergency shareholder meeting," I said calmly. He checked his list, confused, then waved us through. The boardroom was already full when we arrived. Daphne sat at her usual spot, scrolling through her phone with that bored expression she always wore. Reese was reviewing papers, confident and relaxed. Board members filled the other seats, looking irritated at being summoned on short notice. Nobody had told them what this meeting was about. That was intentional. When the door opened and I walked in, the room went silent. Daphne's head snapped up. Her face went through about 5 emotions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, anger, and finally something that looked almost like fear. "What is she doing here?" she demanded, standing up. "Someone call security. This woman was terminated for—" "Sit down, Ms. Winters." The voice came from the head of the table, Daniel Chen, impeccably dressed, with the kind of quiet authority that made people obey without question. He gestured to the chair beside him. "Ms. Ashford is here in her capacity as Chief Operations Consultant for the Meridian Investment Group. We're the majority decision-makers of this company now, and she has some information the board needs to see." I watched the color drain from Daphne's face. Reese had gone very still, his eyes darting between me and the door like he was calculating escape routes. Tate, sitting near the back, looked like he might actually be sick. "Allow me to reintroduce myself," I said, my voice steady and clear. "My name is Neve Ashford. I'm not an intern. I never was. For the past 3 months, I've been conducting a forensic operations audit on behalf of Meridian Investment Group, and what I found is about to change everything." The lights dimmed, the projector screen flickered to life, bank transfers appeared, columns of numbers that told a story of systematic theft, emails between Reese and fake vendors, approval signatures from Daphne on expense reports that would make your jaw drop, a paper trail so clear, so damning, that even a first-year law student could prosecute it. $47 million. I continued. Embezzled over 3 years through fake vendor contracts, fraudulent expense claims, and systematic financial manipulation, Mr. Calloway created shell companies. Ms. Winters approved personal expenses as business costs, and they paid employees to silence anyone who asked questions. Then I played the security footage, the boardroom camera angle from last week. Crystal clear video of Daphne walking toward me, her hand flying across my face, the sound of the slap echoing through the speakers. "This is who you trusted to lead you," I said quietly. "Someone who physically assaults employees and has board members too terrified to intervene." Reese stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "This is insane. These accusations are completely unfounded," and one of our lawyers handed him a cease and desist letter. "You'll want to stop talking, Mr. Calloway. Anything you say can and will be used in the criminal investigation we're filing this afternoon." The room erupted, board members demanding answers, Daphne trying to explain, her voice getting higher and more desperate. Reese silent now, his face ashen. And then the video screen changed to a live feed. Grant Winters, the ailing CEO, appeared from his hospital bed. He looked tired, older than his 60 years, but his eyes were sharp. "I've suspected something was wrong for months," he said, his voice weak but clear. "But I had no proof, no way to know who to trust." He looked directly at me through the camera. "Ms. Ashford, thank you for saving everything I built, and I'm sorry for what you endured to do it." The vote was unanimous. 12 board members, 12 hands raised to remove Daphne Winters and Reese Calloway from all positions effective immediately. I watched Daphne's face crumble as the gavel came down. All that confidence, all that cruelty, all that certainty that she was untouchable, gone in an instant. Security was called. The same guards who'd escorted me out 3 weeks ago now stood beside her. "Ms. Winters, Mr. Calloway, you need to come with us," one of them said firmly. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in that room. Reese went quietly, his lawyer already on the phone, but Daphne turned to me as they led her toward the door, and for a moment I saw something raw in her eyes, not remorse, not apology, just shock that someone like me, someone she deemed so far beneath her, had been the one to destroy her. "You set me up," she hissed. I met her gaze steadily. "No, Daphne, you set yourself up. I just documented it." The door closed behind her, and the room released a collective breath. Tate didn't wait to be fired. His resignation email arrived before lunch, effective immediately, no explanation given. Rumors spread through the office faster than wildfire. The intern who wasn't an intern. The takedown nobody saw coming. By afternoon, the entire company knew. I walked through those halls and felt the shift. People looked at me differently now. Not with dismissal or pity, but with something else. Respect. Maybe even a little fear. I'd become the person who proved that actions have consequences, even for those who thought they were immune. 3 days later, I stood in Grant Winters' hospital room. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by illness and the betrayal of his own daughter. "She was supposed to carry on my legacy," he said quietly, staring out the window. "Instead, she nearly destroyed it." I pulled up a chair beside his bed. "Your company will survive this," I told him. "The foundation you built is strong. It just needs the right people protecting it." He turned to look at me then, really look at me. "The board wants to offer you the position of Chief Operating Officer. Will you accept?" I thought about every moment that led here. Every coffee run where I'd been treated like I was invisible, every meeting where my ideas were dismissed before I even finished speaking, every laugh at my expense, every condescending smile, every assumption that I was less than because of my age or my title or the way I dressed. I thought about that slap, the burning shame on my cheek, the silence of people who watched and did nothing, and then I thought about all the others, the employees who'd been bullied into silence, the good people who'd been driven out for asking questions, the toxic culture that had been allowed to fester because nobody had the power or the proof to stop it. "Yes," I said. "I accept." 6 months later, Helix Dynamics was unrecognizable, not the building or the logo, but the soul of it. I'd implemented protection programs for employees, created channels for reporting abuse, encouraged transparency at every level. The toxic fear that had permeated those glass walls was gone, replaced by something that felt almost radical in corporate America: basic human decency. People said good morning in the hallways. They smiled. They weren't afraid anymore. I walked through the office on a Tuesday afternoon, and people greeted me by name, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The CEO, who'd almost lost everything, had stepped down peacefully, knowing his company was in capable hands. Daphne and Reese were facing criminal charges that would take years to resolve. Tate had disappeared entirely, his LinkedIn profile deleted, his bridges thoroughly burned. And me? I stood in that boardroom where I'd once been slapped and humiliated, now sitting at the head of the table where decisions were made. They thought I was powerless because I didn't fight back immediately, because I smiled when they insulted me, because I stayed quiet when they mocked me. But silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one gathering evidence, building a case, waiting for exactly the right moment to strike. They thought I was just an intern, there to serve coffee and fade into the background. Turns out I was the reckoning they never saw coming, the one who proved that karma doesn't always arrive loud and fast. Sometimes it arrives quiet and methodical, dressed in a cheap blazer, carrying a notebook, and taking very, very careful notes. If this story reminded you that underestimation is just fuel for the fire, smash that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me about a time you proved someone wrong, when you showed them exactly what you were capable of when they'd written you off, and subscribe, because every single week, I bring you stories of people who turned their worst moments into their greatest victories, people who refused to stay down, people who understood that revenge isn't always loud, sometimes it's just the truth, delivered at exactly the right moment. See you in the next one.